discussion will be recorded, right? Um, only this part is going to be recorded for later purposes. We'll post this sort of in on your YouTube and in other forums as well. Um, the Sorry, I'm trying to change this transcription. It's distracting me. Okay. So yes, so only this part gets recorded. The 15-20 minute presentation that Professor Hoskins will give us will be sort of a jumping point for us to have an open discussion, right, about her topic, about what she'll talk about. So the idea is for us to have just an open discussion. You can feel free to ask questions, give critiques, maybe have comments. And the idea of this is to kind of come together and figure out how these really important topics in our fields can be sort of put into the project, and how we can operationalize it, and how it will inform the formation and the operation of this international or multinational project. So the discussion part won't be recorded, but this presentation will be recorded. And then after this, we'll create a small 5-minute, audio podcast, we're calling it, which will be available as well once that's done. So I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to hand this right over to Professor Bryony Hoskins, my beloved boss and fantastic professor here at Roehampton University.
Great, thank you very much. Let me just do the technical bits. Right. So today I'm going to be talking about the gender gaps on political self-efficacy, and looking at the extent that all the diverse measures of political self-efficacy that we have and we use as academics, whether they have the same, are they measuring the same thing, and do they have different gender gaps? So why are we looking at this now? The purpose of doing this research now is because we're coming up to in the autumn of this next year. We're thinking about what experiments we're going to be doing in classrooms. We're thinking about how to develop our intervention, in which case we need to know really what we are working on. Where are the gender gaps, and where are the not gender gaps, or different types of gender gaps? So to where to focus our research. And then secondly, for our quasi experiments and our experiments, we're developing instruments to measure pre-post instruments, and therefore we need to know what measures we're going to be using in order to be able to establish if political self-efficacy goes up or not, according to people's self-reported gender. Okay, so then in order to start, we need to have some kind of definition or common understanding by what we mean in terms of political self-efficacy. We also have the term internal political self-efficacy, which is very almost interchangeably used, preferred more in the political science field in order to demonstrate the difference between internal political self-efficacy with external political efficacy. And those who use more the term political self-efficacy derive more in the education field, working from Bandura's research. But at the same time, the different terminologies, these similar instruments are used for measurement purposes across surveys. And so what we were wanting to know, we're trying to figure out, is political self-efficacy a single construct? Or are there multiple different measures which capture different gender differences? So what is going on with these different measures? Can we just have a really long measure using all the different items in political self-efficacy to create a very long scale? Or do we need to be very precise in how we measure this construct? Okay, so we're looking at it in terms of an individual level of self-confidence in their own ability to politically engage. And what we know about political self-efficacy and why we've developed a bit and research in this area is now in the world of politics, there are not that many areas where there are large gender differences. So in terms of voting turnout, in terms of who says that they will attend protests or volunteer, etc., there are not big gender differences now. But stubbornly, there are two areas where there continue to be gender differences, and that's political self-efficacy and political interest. And then, of course, later on, you get representation, much less representation of women within parliaments, and where you can have a really important say. And what we said, we know that these two forms, the political self-efficacy and political interest, ongoing and being similar for many over time. We also know from my work with Gemma, from the people that we work with in Spain, that between the ages of 11 and 16 is when the gender differences in political self-efficacy occur and really start to broaden out. And what we also know from this research is that classroom discussions are having a big effect on this, with girls' political self-efficacy decreasing in open classroom discussions and boys' self-efficacy increasing in such context. But what is understood by the word politics when we're looking at these survey items, right? And what is it that young people or women are feeling less confident to do? So we need to figure this out in order to identify what kind of interventions we should do and what kind of measurement instruments we should make. So we looked into the literature at the moment, and in terms of political interest, then we know that, well, there's actually differences of opinions across the field, but the most recent research is an author who's going to do a presentation from Spain in a couple of weeks' time, and they say that that when people talk about politics, that and the word politics, it means in their mind, regardless of your gender, whether it means to do with party politics, very conventional understanding of politics, national government, and conflict over policies. So this is what comes to mind when people are understanding and answering the questions. Whereas when we ask about self-reported interests, then we get very different kind of stereotypical responses, where women say that they're more interested in welfare, education, health, gender equality, etc. And men, on the other hand, talk more about party politics and international affairs. And the research so far on political interest has suggested that this is why there is a gender gap in political interest. And this has actually shown that it's a significant contributing factor into why there is stubbornly remaining differences when people are responding to surveys on political interest. It's because that women don't understand that welfare, education, health, gender equality, local politics can also be understood as politics. And if they did, then they would probably, this gap would be much reduced, if not got rid of it. So then the question is, if this is happening in the world of political interest, does this also reflect on self-confidence too? So is it it's the very narrow understanding of politics which young women and girls are feeling less confident about, as opposed to a broader understanding of politics which includes citizenship and social issues? So we tested this out. We have a hypothesis that self-efficacy in politics, first of all, is a single construct, and we'll get similar results for the gender gap on diverse measures, whatever particular measure the surveys use. And we were thinking here originally that then this would have a strong link to when we're using this with young people to what we find within the adult population on similar measures. And then our alternative hypothesis is that there are multiple gender gaps in political self-efficacy. And it's only the scales which use the word politics where we find that gender gap. And actually self-efficacy more broadly, citizenship and wider issues where the word politics isn't used, that gender gap won't be found. So this is what we wanted to look at. In order to do this, we compared the gender gap for two different scales. One scale which used the word politics in the more abstract activities as well, and a scale that used more concrete ideas and school-based activities that used a broader understanding of politics and didn't use the word politics very much at all, and instead talked about citizenship and social issues. And let me just take a little bit of drink. So many of you will be familiar. We use the IEA data, International Citizenship and Civic Education Study. The reason we use the 2009 data is it's the only time, the last time that internal political self-efficacy or political self-efficacy measures were actually included in the survey. So it wasn't possible to do it with the more recent waves of this one. And we know that this is 8th graders and we have 38 countries involved. So we have the two variables, one variable which is more the political self-efficacy, and I'll show you the items in a minute, and one which is more on the citizenship self-efficacy. And what we've used is path multivariate regression models where we use both scales in the same analysis. So it's like one is acting as a control for the other and conditioned by self-reported gender. And then we perform the analysis for each country. And in a second step, we look at correlations with the European Social Survey adult data. So we're looking comparison between, roughly speaking, 14-year-olds with then a representative sample of the adult data from the European Social Survey using the political self-efficacy items there. And then with a UN index on gender equality by country. So these are the two scales that we've looked at. The first one on political self-efficacy has this lead-in statement, which really highlights the word politics in that lead-in statement. It has the 4 response options from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And I will just read out the top line because you're all able to read all the rest of the items, but just to give you a feel, the first item in the political self-efficacy one is, I know more about politics than most people my age. Then the citizenship self-efficacy scale doesn't mention anything about politics in the leading question, and we have the response options from very well to not at all. So how well do you think you'll do the following activities? So it's a different response option. And the first item here is discuss a newspaper article about a conflict between countries. And also we have stand as a candidate in a school election. So there are things which are happening in school as well as outside school in that. But there is only one mention of the word politics, and when it comes up, there's all social issues at the same time. Okay, we come to the results. So these are the non-standardized estimates from the pathway regression analysis. and we have this for the 38 countries here. And what you can see for internal political efficacy is very easy to understand. This is that all the girls are in the red circles and all the boys are in the kind of black color. And what you can see are the gender gaps for each of them. If it's beyond 50, then it means that they were more likely to agree than disagree. And if it's below 50, they were more likely to disagree. And what you can see very clearly, oh yes, one more point. If the circles are not in bold, what this means is that they're non-significant results. But what we see for the majority of the countries are significant results, and we can see that significant gender gap. For example, you can see an extremely large, I wonder, does this work? Yes, an extremely large gap for Austria here. And where the boys are much more agreeing that they can do these activities, and and the girls are clearly disagreeing that they don't feel able to do these activities. And the gender gap is very similar, it's in the same direction for all the countries that we can see. Alternatively, then, we get to citizenship self-efficacy. Here we see a completely different picture, okay? This time you can see that in the main, if there is a trend, it is that girls are actually have more confidence in doing these activities which were within this scale than boys. There are many more which are insignificant, and actually these are smaller in size, so much less pronounced than the gender gap on internal political self-efficacy. So what we can see straight away from this is that different measures are showing very different gender gaps, and it's the internal political self-efficacy items which are showing that traditional gender gap. Then this makes life a little bit more complicated, but I still show you because we're working on this paper and still trying to understand exactly what the data is showing us. So this are correlations with the European Social Survey data. I think, and you can see the items. So this was it's the closest year. In fact, the first time the European Social Survey used these political self-efficacy items were in 2014. So that's why it's not exactly the same year. But you can see this is item unable to take active role in political groups. And the other item which is in this survey is confident in own ability to participate in politics. And what we get are two different results. So for this one item, it correlated only with the internal political self-efficacy item at the country level, and with a significant correlation there. And then our other measure on citizenship self-efficacy, this correlated with the other item in the survey, a bit surprisingly perhaps, with confident in own ability to participate in politics. Although we do have to be careful with this, and it's something that Dimo, our lead from Belgium, has talked about ecological correlations, that sometimes that things which correlate at the individual level actually correlates in the completely opposite direction at the country level. So we have to be a bit cautious about drawing any strong conclusions from this, because there can be factors within the countries which lead to very different results. So it's more of a puzzle and something to think about rather than to draw strong conclusions, because ideally what you'd want is longitudinal data to see if these continue to occur right into the adult age group. And what we can see here, this is a slightly different, well, this is a different index, which includes number of female politicians within it. So this is a UN index. And here the same, we get different, very different correlations with the different parts of the index. And actually the one which is the most interesting is the with the citizenship efficacy one, that then countries which are more equal have higher levels of political citizenship self-efficacy. So this one kind of makes more sense. But those are both kind of correlations to just to think about what we're measuring and to think about this a bit further. So from the this initial examination of the IEA data, then we can see that taking a broader understanding of politics, that political self-efficacy is not a single construct, and there is no single gender gap. In the ICCS data, the abstract politics is where the gender gap is really pronounced, and that is the traditional gender gap, which is discussed widely in the political science literature. And this could be, we're not certain of this, but it could be that it's due to the fact that what it's being understood is party politics. And this could be due to still inequalities existing in terms of role models, still less women in parliament, less women at the top of parliament, and taking on prime minister and president's roles. And perhaps girls are still being socialized to be less confident in these areas. But instead, what we're seeing is something different with citizenship self-efficacy. And when it came to more concrete, specific tasks that don't mention the word, or very rarely mention the word politics, that we don't have that gender gap. I'd like to say anymore, or we don't have such a pronounced gender gap. And sometimes when it's on citizenship and social issues, sometimes you actually get girls feeling more confident than boys. So this became a bit more complicated when we looked at the European Social Survey data, because I was expecting that we would find just a correlation only with the internal political self-efficacy with the European Social Survey items, because those items are the ones which follow the political science traditions and use the word politics. But we found one of them to correlate with one of our scales, and the other scale to correlate with the other item. Why does this happen? Well, this is for further discussion and further thought. So in terms of the conclusions for this, and in terms of what we need to take probably forward for at least within our GEPIT research project, it's that it's likely to be, if we need to address the gender gap, it's likely to be the very traditional, conventional party politics that where we need to work on in order to increase girls' self-empowerment. And then, so that the focus then of our interventions and the focus for our experiments probably should be more on this aspect more than the broader sense of citizenship and social issues, which can be more interesting, perhaps, and more trendy and easier to get young people to engage on, but is probably not where the gender gap still is. And that we're saying that it was a missed opportunity that the IEA studies stopped using this scale, because we can't, going forward in the last couple of rounds, we're unable to say any more on this, or to look at different more recent methodologies which could possibly reduce this, because this scale hasn't been used and only the citizenship efficacy scale has been taken forward. But luckily, then we have our GEPIC EU UKRI funded research. So we're going to try and work on this a bit more and a bit further in order to understand this a bit better, and then to implement this within our experiments and interventions, and to use the knowledge from this kind of study to develop different measurement instruments for experiments and intervention. Okay, Lenora, thank you.
Thank you so much, Bryony. That was really eye-opening. I was just in the middle of writing a message in the chat. I just want to make sure everyone can see the chat. Does everyone have access to the chat room, of the chat function? Mine is saying it's muted, but I'm not sure if that's true. Can you? Excellent. I think you guys can see it. Fantastic. Okay. So yes, thank you for that engaging presentation, Bryony. There's a lot of information in there I think we can talk through. And so the idea around the next portion of this seminar is to just have an open discussion, right? So this is a very relevant topic to what we're all researching in GEPIC. And there's discussion and debate around some of the ideas that Bryony talked about. Or should I say Professor Hoskins talked about. Bryony. Yes, so
Please
this
say
is
Bryony.
yes. So yes, so the idea is for us to just have an open discussion and relaxed, informal, nothing really formal, just to kind of have a casual talk about how relevant this might be to our work, what we think it implies about what we can be implementing in our quasi experiments, in our trials, in our interventions. What are some ideas around, why this might be the case, right? And so, yeah, so raise your hand. I think Teams has a great function where they give you the number of who's raised their hand, which is wonderful. You could also feel free to pop something into the chat as well, and we'll keep track of that as well. So I'm going to stop recording so we can have a free conversation and feel relaxed to speak our minds. If I can, there we go. Okay, we've stopped.